I first heard the incredible story of Jayne Mansfield several years ago. The impact her life has made in the world we know today is underrated at best. So let's take a look at the life and legacy of this 50s bombshell. Jayne Mansfield was born Vera Jane Palmer, April 19th, 1933. Jayne is an undeniable baddie of history, often imitated, never replicated. Jayne was seen as an American bombshell, yet she was so much more than that. Jayne's mother was a school teacher who strongly believed in discipline. Jayne's father passed of a heart attack in their car at the age of 34, with Jayne in the back seat. Jayne was only 3 years old at the time, a traumatic experience that haunted Jayne the rest of her life. Jayne was an only child who grew up starstruck by the glamour of Hollywood. She would imitate the women she saw. Jayne was only 16 when she married her first husband, Paul Mansfield. They eloped. After the birth of her first child, Jayne Marie, Jayne still couldn't shake the need for stardom. She hit the beauty pageant circuit hard. Being seen and getting her name out there allowed even more doors to open for Jayne. In 1952, at the age of 19, Jayne persuaded her husband Paul to move the family to Hollywood. Jayne would go on to be compared to Marilyn Monroe numerous times. One of the ways she and Marilyn both knew to make it in Hollywood was to dye your hair blonde. Both these women were intelligent and studied the ins and outs of Hollywood in order to get to the top. In the 1950s, the blonde bombshell image in Hollywood had taken over. Jayne was naturally gifted when it came to the curvaceous blonde aesthetic Hollywood was looking for. She was a brick. Da-na-na-na, house. Jayne made a name for herself by standing out and overstaging almost any woman around her. Jayne Mansfield was not camera shy by any means, and photographers and the press loved her for that. Jayne would put herself in any situation that would advance her ultimate goals of fame and stardom, an unapologeticness that many women can learn from. Jayne was well known for pulling stunts like wardrobe malfunctions to get attention, but the reality was all she had to do was show up. Jayne even made side-eyeing iconic. Her most famous moment doing this was at an industry party for Sophia Loren in Hollywood. At this party, meant to celebrate Sophia's rising star, Jayne Mansfield struts in late and sits right at Sophia's table. Here's what Sophia had to say about the incident. Paramount had organized a party for me. All of cinema was there. It was incredible. And then comes in Jayne Mansfield, the last one to come. For me, that was when it got amazing. She came right for my table. She knew everyone was watching. Listen, look at the picture. Where are my eyes? In my face, you can see the fear. I'm so frightened that everything in her dress is going to blow, boom, and spill all over the table. Loren went on to explain for the rest of the evening, her mind was always on that dress.
I've been in men's bedrooms before.
And man, oh, Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield, that is. The terrific star of Rock Hunter.
At 6 weeks to have her a star. You know, the first thing... 6 weeks? Oh, easy, Fats. It takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day. She ain't Rome. What we're talking about is already built.
Jayne Mansfield wasn't afraid to use her God-given assets. This boldness put her on the Hollywood map and made her a controversial and highly talked about figure at the time. Jayne's increasing status as a Hollywood sex symbol took its toll on her first marriage to Paul Mansfield, and the two got divorced. Enter Mickey Hargitay, a beefcake in his own right. Mickey won Mr. Universe in 1955. He was hired to perform as a muscle man in Mae West's nightclub act in New York City. According to Mickey, when he and Jayne first met at the show, she was asked what she wanted to order for dinner and replied, "I'll have a steak and the man on the left." A woman after my own heart. Mickey went on to say about Jayne, "You have to be very smart to play a dumb blonde."
I understand that Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell both are quietly simmering at you. First, because of your takeoff on Monroe, and secondly, because you upstaged Jane Russell at a photography studio.
Gee, I'm awfully sorry to hear that. I really didn't mean to do that. I don't remember the incident.
I see.
This time, Jayne was starstruck, and Mickey was in love. Jayne could play the piano and violin and also spoke fluent Italian, French, and German. It's said she had a very high IQ. Working in the entertainment industry myself, I'm aware of how smart you have to be if you're not well connected to make it. One of the nicest actors I've come across personally working on set was the daughter of Jayne Mansfield and Mickey Hargitay, MARISKA HARGITAY, star of Law and Order SVU and New York City royalty. Jayne and Mickey would go on to create their own variety show in Las Vegas. Mickey trained Jayne and she became a skilled acrobat to fit the role. Jayne's favorite role was always as a mother, and she and Mickey would go on to have 2 sons as well as Mariska. Jayne was a girly girl who loved her pink mansion and heart-shaped pools at the home she shared with Mickey and their children.
Say, Jayne, you've been crowned Queen of Uranium, Miss Peanut Butter and Jelly, Miss Bluebonnet Belle of Texas, and amongst other things, I think you were once crowned Queen of Stalled Crosstown Traffic.
Oh, my.
Now, of all your honors, which title do you cherish the most?
You know which title I like?
No,
I like to be called Mother.
Touche, dear. That sums it up.
On a trip to the Bahamas, Jayne and Mickey's boat capsized and they barely escaped. Many presumed their accident might have been just another deliberate publicity stunt.
Down in the Bahamas, it was reported that you and your husband, Mickey, and a press agent were missing overnight in shark-infested waters. The press took a look at it as though it was just another publicity stunt because you were involved in it. Now, here's a photograph taken the next day, and when I looked at it, and we were discussing it up at the Tribune, I said, this is not a fake. No one can look the way Jayne looks and the way Mickey looks here and do this just for publicity. Now, you can understand, though, why you were suspect, can't you?
If I had twin babies, people would think it was for a publicity stunt. I never thought in my life, after having gone through what we went through down there, that anyone could doubt it being true. I even don't like to discuss it. It was through the wonderful help of the dear Lord that we were saved.
As movie offers dwindled with the changing times, Jayne went on to bear it all in Promises, Promises. After the tragic passing of Marilyn Monroe, many assumed Jayne would fill her shoes in Hollywood, but it didn't work out that way. People couldn't shake their perception of her as a dumb blonde, and those roles were in increasingly less demand. So Jayne made her way back to Vegas to sing in scantily clad outfits to appease the crowds. While Mickey stayed home and raised the kids, Jayne was accused of engaging in multiple outside relationships and affairs. Jayne allegedly announced her divorce from Mickey to the press as he stood beside her, none the wiser. She went on to marry Matt Cimber, a theater director who promised her the moon and stars. She hoped he would help her make her way back to the top of Hollywood.
Everybody says, boy, she must be really a hot number. I didn't think so. I know more secretaries and more, you know, I mean, not to negate, you know, what she, not to negate what she had as a sex symbol, as being, you know, when you say sex symbol, what does that mean? Jayne was never more to me than a pinup.
But Matt didn't know anything about Hollywood. Jayne and Matt went on to have a son, but their marriage quickly soured. Mickey Hargitay was there as a constant best friend to help her through it. Multiple marriages, the pressures of motherhood, and sustaining her lifestyle combined with her reputation as a pinup drove Jayne to abusing drugs and alcohol. During her divorce from Matt Cimber, Jayne entered a relationship with her divorce attorney, Sam Brody, an attorney known for getting his hands dirty. He was an excessive drinker, and their relationship was volatile. Brody pushed Jayne to finish out her career in low-tier nightclubs around the U.S. and Britain. On June 29, 1967, Jayne, Brody, 3 of her children, including 3-year-old Mariska, and their driver were riding on the road past midnight on their way to New Orleans from Biloxi, Mississippi for an interview. The overworked driver assigned to them was running on very little sleep. His exhaustion, combined with foggy road conditions, caused their car to crash into the back of a tractor trailer and slide underneath it. Jayne was killed instantly, said to have been nearly decapitated from the crash, though this is widely disputed. Only her 3 children asleep in the back seat survived, with mostly minor injuries. Mariska has since made peace with an early career filled with comparisons to her late mother. She said, "In some ways, being the daughter of a Hollywood icon has been a burden. I used to hate constant references to my mom because I wanted to be known for myself. Losing my mother at such a young age is the scar of my soul." She also said, "My mother was this amazing, beautiful, glamorous sex symbol, but people didn't know that she played the violin and had a 160 IQ and had 5 kids and loved dogs. She was just so ahead of her time. She was an inspiration. She had this appetite for life, and I think I share that with her." Someone once said about remembering my mother, "All you have to do is look in the mirror." Mariska added, "She's with me still." Jayne Mansfield literally blessed us with one of the most iconic detectives of all time, Detective Olivia Benson. Jayne would go on to inspire the girls and Hollywood years after her passing. And you might not realize it, but her death may have saved your life and countless others. You ever notice the bars with reflector tape located on the backs of mini tractor trailers? They are known technically as the rear underrun protection system. Because of her tragic passing, a law was created so that these bars, also known as Mansfield bars, were required and mandated on all tractor trailers. Jayne was only 34 years old when she passed, the same age as her father when he passed in the car when she was only 3. Jayne was buried in her hometown of Penn Argyl, Pennsylvania, something she requested of her husband Mickey while she was still alive. Mickey called her his wife up until her death, her consummate friend. Jayne will always be known as Hollywood's smartest dumb blonde, and now you know a little more about her. She was a mother who loved her kids. She loved being a mother. She lived her life to the fullest on her own terms. A Hollywood legend in her own right. A true baddie of history. Thank you for watching.